Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Coming up on Off 90, we'll visit Stoney End Harps in Red Wing, whose beautiful handmade harps are heard around the world. Jump in the car as we showcase some of the spectacular barn quilts in and around Houston County. We visit with Dustin Heckman, the youngest ever executive director of the Mower County Historical Society. And we examine a unique group of mixed media sculptures in Winona. Buckle up, it's all just ahead, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Off 90. First on today's program, not much is made by hand these days, but Stoney End Harps in Red Wing is breaking the mold, crafting beautiful harps whose sounds are heard around the world. We'll take you behind the scenes as the harps are made and share some of the incredible music they create.
Personally, I think that the harp is one of the most wonderful instruments. It's not the easiest instrument to play, but it's one of the most forgiving. When you really begin to learn the harp, you become one with the harp. I think it's so important that people learn to play and make their own music. Our motto is, music can help save the world, and that's what we would like to do.
I wouldn't say I enjoy the first step out of bed in the morning, but I enjoy going to work. I'm Gary Stone. I've been making harps here for around 25 years. Well, back when I was in college, I hung out at this little dulcimer shop, and they made mountain dulcimers, which we still continue to make. And they were popular in the 60s, back when people walked around in bare feet. So when the gentleman that was making the dulcimers decided to retire, I bought all the patterns and the dulcimer business from him. Along with the other stuff, there was a harp pattern in there. And he hadn't even really mentioned the harps. But there was a design. There was a lot of things that weren't very good about them. But there was a real core of a really good idea. So I engineered it so it was better woodworking, better finishing, and better design. And people started buying them, and eventually I quit my day job and started making harps. So it's all continued from that small beginning. There's a lot of things I like about the harp making. I'll pick the best side here, a little bit of a flaw here. Making beautiful instruments is part of it, but there's a clear function that you have to make. The harps have to sound good. So we'll set this one at G. So there's a clear need to develop both the aesthetic part of making harps and then the engineering part of making harps so that they function well. And I mark them out, lay them out on the wood, try to find a way to get all the different parts out of the different boards. We've made around almost 7,000 harps in 25 years. We have 12 different models of harps that we sell in 3 different woods. This is our wood pile here. This is some cherry wood here. So it's a whole combination of things, all the way from the woodworking part, the design work. This one here is a little bit low. And the engineering, and then the opportunity to provide a tool for artistic expression on other people. This is our third floor of our barn here. We started this project in 2001, bought the building, and it was just an ordinary agricultural barn full of old hay and junk. It took us about a year to get it ready for use. When we purchased it, the owner was very keen on having some use, some adaptive reuse. We're losing barns in Minnesota and all over the whole Midwest. Every year there's hundreds of barns falling down. And when we found a way to use this, to rehab this into a different adaptive use, we're able to continue to save the building. And it should be good for another 100 years.
There are 4 poetry barns in Red Wing, and they were commissioned by the College of Design out of Minneapolis, I believe, and the Walker Center. And it was a grant, and they found a poet. It's the 4 seasons, and our barn is the summer season. Green lit limbs fan glances, shirtless contours in the downpour, ancestors folded into valleys, honey in the burning hive.
My name is Brittany Gretz. I'm Gary and Eve's youngest daughter. You're using your fingertips. It's an actual pulling motion, so you're pulling your fingers in towards your palm and pushing out with your thumbs. But it's, if you have any piano, you have to turn your brain sideways because you're going towards you and away from you instead of side to side. Various people have had experiences where they've found the actual vibrations of it going through their bodies is really, they find it very therapeutic. You feel it through your body, through your hands, as well as hearing it, I think maybe more than some other instruments. If you're an absolute beginner, you can just play around with it and it still sounds really nice. Each of the harps will have a slightly different sound. With a cherry, you typically get a warm, sort of mellow sound. With walnut, you tend to get kind of a rich, dark sound with a little bit more of the bass. Maple is a very, very dense wood, and you get a very, very bright sound.
Will there really be harps in heaven? Will it get me in through the back door? Will Gabriel say, since you already play, come on in, that'll even your score? Will there really be harps in heaven? Will my harp wear a golden crown? And will they hire someone from down below to carry the thing around?
This is the first time that this harp is sung. I enjoy just the idea of that this is if that were music, it would be the first time. No, it's not complicated. You set the harp up in whatever key you're going to play. If you look at the inside of a piano, you'll see this. This is the shape that you'll see on the inside of a piano. So we just call them naked pianos. We have a sense of historical connection. I've seen some Greek vase with clearly a harp player playing on it. There's an Egyptian harp that came out of a pyramid or a tomb. There are a lot of illuminated manuscripts that show pictures of what the harps used to look like. Harps have been around for a long time. Well, I like harps because I like making them. I like being able to provide an opportunity for someone else to make music. I don't play the harp, and I have very little musical background or talent. I've always loved music, but I've never played. You wouldn't want to hear me sing. But I like the music, I like the engineering, I like the opportunity to work with people who do make music and provide the tools for their expression.
Oh, it's a great feeling. You're giving somebody the chance to get that same kind of emotional feeling and release. A lot of people will come home after a very difficult day. They'll have their harp, they'll just simply lean it up against themselves and close their eyes and just noodle around on the harp. It's very soothing.
A colorful phenomenon is popping up on barns all over southern Minnesota: barn quilts. These colorful works of art connect farmland and families, one barn at a time. The city of Caledonia in Houston County is working particularly hard to get their quilts noticed by creating a barn quilt tour. So jump in the car and let's take a look.
Quilts tell a story, and this is just another way to tell a story.
I just love the bold colors of it. I love the pattern and how it changes when you look at it. It depends on where you put your eye. It changes all the time. We live really in God's country down here, I think, and it's such a beautiful spot. We have so many neat things to offer people when they come to Houston County. Minnesota's losing about 1,400 barns a year, so our goal is to help people take pride in the barns that they have and to leave them up and maybe put a piece of artwork on them also. My name is Ann Salmis, and my parents, Harold and Dorothy Hendel, had the first barn quilt in Houston County, west of Caledonia. They had seen the barn quilts in Iowa and thought it would be a neat idea to do here in Houston County. We started out with 5. By fair time we had 16, but throughout the time people were putting quilts up. Right now in 2010 we have 44 quilts up, and our goal is to have 50 in the county by the end of the year. The project just really grew quickly, and I think people are really taking pride in their barns, in our rural heritage. People stop and they pull into our driveway and they're just really excited about seeing the quilts and thought it was a great idea. We now have a tour with hopefully 50 quilts by the end of the year. And the tour route is set up throughout Houston County. You can wind through some beautiful back roads, see different streams. We have some really neat natural resources in the area. We're trying to get people to stay in the local B&Bs, in the local state park, to use the facilities in Caledonia and surrounding communities.
The initiative's called Quilting the Countryside. A lot of groups came together to help us. The Sentence to Serve group helped prime boards. The school industrial arts class helped prime the boards for it. Community volunteers helped paint quilts for our auctions and for our initial quilts to get those up. You know, Senator Sharon Ropes played a lead role as well in helping us promote this by designating us as the heart of quilt country.
God's given us years of happiness here, now we must part. And as the angels come and call for you, the pangs of grief tug at my heart. Oh, my darling, my heart breaks as you take your long
Well, I think it's important because we're preserving our history by preserving our barns. There's a lot of history in southeast Minnesota. It's one of the first areas of the state to be settled. The barns have a lot of history and tradition. That was the way that they put food on the table 50, 100 years ago. And, you know, it's just a real craftsmanship that put up that barn. And they're of all sizes. There's some round barns, there's square barns, there's barns that have been added onto. And the barns are starting to get to the point of deteriorating, whether do you fix them up or do you tear them down. And by putting a barn quilt on them, there's a lot of pride has come back in these old barns. And it's not only seeing the quilts, but to be able to see these barns.
This farm will be 100 years old in 2016. So we're just about a century-old farm. And the barn was built in 1916 by my wife's grandfather, which was Herman Dearson. They started the construction in the fall of 1916 and finished it in 1917. And the reason for the lean on the barn is because during that spring of 1917, the wind kind of blew it over a little bit and it started to lean. So they built the lean on over on this side over here to hold it back up. The reason for the barn quilt is my wife, Bonnie, decided, well, she'd like to do one. And the reason she picked the thistle, because we used to have a lot of thistles out in our pasture out here. I just think it's kind of neat. You know, I thought it was a good idea when she wanted to do it. I suppose if we do keep it painted, it'll probably stay there for a long, long time. Who knows? That'll be kind of neat.
I think every quilt tells a story. It tells a little bit about who you are and what you love and what is important to you. My barn quilt I've had up for about 2 years now. It's called Cross and Crown. Our faith is a big part of our lives, and that's another reason why we chose this barn quilt. This farm my father-in-law bought from his dad in 1971, and my husband's grandfather bought it in the 1950s. So it's in our third generation. We're still actively farming, and we want to promote that to our next generation. It's kind of fun to see the different vehicles come by, watching the different license plates that come by. We did have a tour bus last summer that stopped by, and that was a lot of fun.
I think it's a great way to carry on the quilting tradition. Some people are not seamstresses, they do not know how to sew, but doing these barn quilts and painting them, it's something that just about everyone can do. So I think it's neat that we can get quilts out on our barns and preserve that quilting tradition.
I'm Steve Bauer from Caledonia Lumber Company in Caledonia, Minnesota, and we build homes and agricultural buildings. I got about 10 employees, so I switch off, and every now and then I'll pull an employee off and say, okay, we gotta go put a barn quilt up, so. We have probably put up personally about 10 of them with our big machine. First, somebody's gonna come in and purchase 2 pieces of AC plywood and 5 2x4s, 8 foot long. It's just standard 2x4 pine, non-treated. And again, the plywood's just a good 7-ply plywood, so it doesn't delaminate on you. Then they take them to whoever they want and they paint them. I think they look great, and there's so many different designs. If you stand up close and look at some of them, you can't picture the design. You have to back up and take a look at them.
It's a turkey, the Winnebago Tom. Just because of the heritage of turkeys down here, they've netted a lot of turkeys and released them, and you see a lot of turkeys down here. And there's no other animal barn quilts, so I thought I'd do some animal.
It makes me very proud. We've got people coming all over to see these quilts. And it's interesting, the process of the quilts going up. It's fun to see that pride in the history, and you'll see neighbors talking to neighbors about, well, you remember this farm was owned by this individual, and it's brought back a lot of history just within our community.
Come ride with me in the early morning light. Watch the sun coming up and shining bright on the unfamiliar towns along the way. pale sky and a brand new day. Hold me tighter, wanna feel you close to me. Speak a little quieter, hey girl, wanna be my love.
A passion for history knows no age, and Dustin Heckman is living proof. He's the youngest ever director of the Mower County Historical Society and a self-described history geek. Come along and meet Dustin and experience a day in his life. Enjoy this piece from the first season of Off 90.
I think my fiance's exact words are history geek. I am more along the lines of a young guy that likes old things. I just think I'm just one of those unique people that are young and understand history and want to help preserve it. This is what I went to school for, this is what I was trained to do, and what I like doing. So to be this young and working with so many old things doesn't bother me. You can see here, this would have been the people that retired from the mechanics department at Hormel. So we keep this. But then a lot of the people that are involved with historical museums or societies are much, much older than I am. And I bring the new modern museum way of doing things. The biggest push in the last few years is to digitize everything. Make your collection available online while we're trying to adjust to the new age coming through to see the next generation coming up that's going to be your main clientele. How do they want to receive services, or how do they want their experience to be? You're getting into the millennial generation, which is more my generation, where, you know, I want it here, I want it now. So this is one of the original plant buildings. So you got to adapt to that experience of, well, how much can I give you, but enough to get you to keep, you know, coming my way. These were like the P.O. boxes out of, I believe this was out of the Elkton post office. This is just not something that belongs to me. It doesn't just belong to our board or our members or our volunteers. You know, this is something that's for everyone. This is your historical society. It's not ours, it's yours. We need the public to help us. There's always cool stuff out here. And it's never ending. It could be the 12-year-old that loves climbing up on the train and blowing the whistle at Christmas time or ringing the bell, to the 80-year-old kid that likes going up and doing the exact same thing. We've got something for every age, and it doesn't matter how old you are.
No need to remember when, 'cause everything old is new again.
Before we reach our destination this week, we're taking a brief pit stop in Winona. We want to share some of Lisa Schreiner-Truax's work, a unique series of mixed media sculptures called Synthetic Harmony. Truax's art combines granite, clay, and sand mixed with glass, metal, and glaze. See if you can spot her theme of the natural versus the man-made. See you next week, Off 90.
Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. KSMQ is pleased to celebrate Southern Minnesota's arts, culture, and heritage through funding provided by the Legacy Amendment and the citizens of Minnesota. Here's how.
Well, I think that just paying attention to a particular artist that's doing something and giving them recognition is in a sense honoring them, and it's not something that necessarily happens in everyday life. With public television, I get the opportunity to talk to a much wider audience. I can talk about some of the same things that I might do in a college lecture to a few students, but with Off 90, I mean, it's presented to a much wider audience and talking about, my work.
KSMQ is telling the stories of our region's arts, culture, and heritage.
In order to honor the past,
engage with the present,
and inspire the future.
That's what we do. Join us.